All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Femi. I'm a solutions engineer here at Sumo Logic. And I'll be going through the demo of our new Kubernetes solution today. Just a little bit of background on Sumo Logic. For those of you that might not be familiar, we were established in 2010. We're deployed in 8 regions across 5 continents. We have over 2,000 plus customers that use our platform to proactively monitor, troubleshoot, secure the application, and improve infrastructure. You can easily send any types of logs or metrics to the Sumo Logic platform, and you can instantly run searches, create dashboards, and alerts. Sumo Logic enables world-class dev, security, and operations teams to accelerate their release cycles, harden the security posture, and of course, maximize uptimes for their customers. Today, I'll just be showing specifically Kubernetes, how we help achieve those results. So a bit of housekeeping before we get into it. We'll be sending the recording of the webinar to everyone after the session. Also, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A, and my handsome colleague, Carl, who's also on the line, will be able to answer those questions for you. So we're going to be pretty light on the slides today. I know personally for me it's hard to focus on slides, so I wouldn't want to do that to everyone here. So for the agenda, we'll be going through the actual demo, which of course is a Kubernetes troubleshooting scenario. We'll talk about how to use our solution to find an issue, identify an issue, and then get down to the root cause. We'll talk about our pre-built apps in the app catalog, how to search data, how we actually collected all that data, and then we'll go through another troubleshooting scenario with the Kubernetes solution. And then finally, we have some time for Q&A at the very end. All right, so hopping right into the platform. This is our Sumo Logic platform. And then the way we get to our Kubernetes portion, we'll just press that new tab up top, and then press this Explore button right here. Let me just right size into this. All right, so this is our new Explore tab, specifically made for Kubernetes. This will show all the different clusters that you collected data from. So here in this case, in this environment, we have data just from this one cluster. This is our prod. This is our prod 01 travellogic.info cluster. If we had multiple clusters, we could see them here and explore them. But in this case, we just have just the one cluster. What's really great about this Explore view is it's very easy to navigate between the different entities. So we have nodes, namespace services within Kubernetes, and sometimes you want to look at your cluster in different views. So if you want a more infrastructure-centric view, you can click right on this Kubernetes node view. And then once this populates, you can expand out your cluster, and you can see, okay, what are the different pods in my environment? What are the different nodes in my environment? In this case, we're looking at different EC2 nodes that I have within my cluster. And then you can navigate to any of these specific nodes if you're interested in one. So let's say maybe you get an alert that one node is running hot. You come in here and click right on that node. So I'm just going to click on this node right here. And then as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, this pre-built dashboard actually updated based on that level that I'm at right here, right? So I click on the node, and then the dashboard updated automatically for the node-focused dashboard, because the things we care about at the node level, like a lot of the infrastructure-related metrics, like your CPU memory currently and over time. And we've gotten these nice gauge visualizations here, so you can easily see if you're close to a limit, right? These type of things that you care about at the node level are different than what you might care about at the cluster level. So I can hop back to the cluster level, and then I can change, let's say, my namespace view. In my opinion, this is probably our most common view that customers use, then probably service and deployment, as you can see right here. In this case, we're looking at the cluster overview dashboard, which gives you a great visualization of what's happening at the cluster level. And you can navigate it and see different KPIs that we provide out of the box. So everything I'm showing you here is completely out of the box, and this overview dashboard is just a great place to start. We also have a cluster explorer view, which again is at the kind of cluster level. You can see different information about the nodes, and then the CPU per pod across these nodes, and then all the CPU and memory details for your pod sorted out by the one using the most CPU and memory. Another thing I should mention, we'll talk about it a bit later, we also have specific dashboard for your different control planes, you know, your AKS, your GKE, or if you're managing yourselves as well too. So let's just hop back to the cluster overview dashboard. Like I said, it contains the most amount of information. Here you can easily see information about resource utilization across the cluster. So you can see how much CPU you're utilizing across the different nodes. So in this case, we're only at 12% utilization. So maybe we over provisioned, maybe we're paying a little more than we need to. But and you can also see in this panel right here, the pods running across the namespace in a very easy to understand honeycomb view. If you scroll down a little bit further, we can see CPU by namespace or your file system usage by namespace as well too. And then one really important dashboard panel, that's the terminator weighted by namespace. So if a pod is terminator weighted, it means the pod's not running right. So which is generally an issue. So it's very easy to visualize that right in this context. One thing to note, you can alert off any of these metrics as well too. So not only can you visualize, but obviously alert proactively. Then we have these two panels right here. These panels show how much resources for CPU and memory, the different namespaces they're using, but they also show the limits as well. So limits are very important to set for your pods, just good overall Kubernetes hygiene from an operational standpoint, right? So if you're not setting limits, then you might run into issues with certain pods. You know, I'm using too much memory and CPU, then it affects the rest of your application. So since we're already at the namespace view, we can actually talk about noticing an issue and then drilling down into that issue, right? So here in this prod login namespace, I see two pods are actually red. So each one of these honeycombs represents a pod, right? So green means it's running, red means it's not. Simple to understand, unless of course, you know, green is bad for you, then this might be an issue, but you know, if not, it's a very easy to understand dashboard panel. So we can hover over this red pod right here and then take a look at the tooltip. And as you can see, the behavior, it's flapping up and down, and looks like it's spinning up and then spinning right back down. And if you look closely at the tooltip, you can see on the second line, it says this pod equals carbon black. So it's a carbon black pod. We're actually running in our cluster that's generating sample logs from carbon black. So now we can just use the namespace view to drill down into that pod. So the first thing we want to do is we want to expand this cluster right here. And then, well, I know that's my prod login namespace. So I can go ahead and expand that too as well. All right. And then as you can see, again, the dashboard on the right updated automatically for the entity that I'm looking at. And again, these are all pre-built out of the box dashboard that we're showing here. So this namespace view, I see the pods running by deployment. And again, we can see that carbon black pod right here. And then so I'm just going to go right ahead and click right into that. And again, this is this dashboard, as you can notice up top, it's already pre-filtered for this specific carbon black pod. So I don't have to worry about putting any input myself. It's already right there for me automatically. And I can see in this pod right here, I'm seeing this panel, notice one pod that's in a pods in crash loop back off. And so this means the pod is continually restarting, right? I can actually look at those pod events here too as well. And I can see that's back off, restarting, failed container. So really what we see with a lot of Kubernetes customers is with their troubleshooting issues, they're going into the cluster and they're trying to run kubectl commands in the pod before they're using Sumo Logic, right? Or now Sumo Logic, those same kind of commands, that you would have to run to say, okay, hey, let me see the events we're going to describe on this pod. Those type of things are all surfaced with one easy to understand dashboard right here, right? So I'm just going to scroll down and investigate a little further. If I take a look at this pod state over time, we can see that the pod is in a crash loop back off, which we noticed earlier. It's spinning up and right back down and then staying in this crash loop back off state. So let's see if we see anything interesting about the memory. So I'm just going to scroll down to different panels. And then here in this panel, we're actually seeing the memory usage, but also the limits. So as you can see, this black line right here at the bottom is actually how much memory is being used. And then the red line is just the limits. And like I mentioned earlier, we're pulling all these metrics automatically as well. So no need to statically put in the limits and usage. These are all being pulled automatically. And then if we take a look at it, it seems that we can see the memory spike up right here, and then it goes above the limit and then immediately drops right back down, right? So to me, it means something's happening with the memory. So let's scroll down and see if I can notice anything as well. And aha, this little panel right here that says terminated containers by reason. Very, easy to understand panel. If you hover over this one reason right here, you can see that within this tooltip, again, it's telling us that the reason at the bottom line is saying that the reason is out of memory killed, right? So this pod is spinning up, is using way more memory than it should, is going way over the limit, and then Kubernetes is just killing it because it's using too much memory. So just to kind of reiterate, without even running a single, kubectl command, going into cluster, or even looking at a log, we were able to determine why our pod was spinning up, spinning down, and being terminated, right? So if I go back to the beginning, we were able to start from this dashboard right here. Notice this carbon black pod was in red, and then we're able to use our namespace view, go to carbon black pod, and then just simply scroll down to this terminated containers by reason, and then realize that our container was getting out of memory killed. So I'm just going to pause right here, see if there are any questions before I move further. All right. So from here, let's actually move on to how we would search the raw logs, because a lot of times with a Kubernetes issue, the Explore tab and the pre-built dashboards are more than enough to find the issue. But sometimes you actually want to run some analytics on your logs or look at the raw logs. So first I want to do is I want to go over to the collection page right here, and then let's filter out by this prod01 travellogic.info. So right here we're filtering by this cluster, and as you can see, we have this filtered out collector right here. This is the collector we're sending logs and metrics to. So one feature that we've added recently is what's called custom fields. So if I click on edit right here, these custom fields help us do free-form tagging of your sources and collectors. So in this case, we have a cluster field, and every log and metric that comes into this cluster will automatically be tagged with this field called cluster equals prod01.travellogic.info. So let's take a look at the logs from this cluster. And to do that, I'll click back up top. I'll say new, and I'll click on log search. Then what I can do here is I can just use that cluster field. So I will then say cluster equals prod01.travellogic.info. And then I'm just going to go ahead and press start over here. And then this will return all the logs for this cluster within the last 15 minutes. So what we're doing, this makes the searching really easy because everything, all the entities that were collected are tagged with that piece of information that it came from, right? So if it came from a daemon set, that's tagged. what cluster it came from, what namespace right here it came from, what pod it came from, and then also whatever type of labels you are already tagging Kubernetes entities with, we'll pick those up and those will be searchable, right? And you can also filter on these too as well. It just makes it a lot easier once you know what you're searching for. One example I've heard being used a lot is that customers, they actually have a label for the version of the application, right? So they'll say, okay, I have this version 5.1, they'll do a release, they'll say it's version 5.2, and then that's just another piece of data that they can use to search, but also do comparative analysis on. So you can say, hey, what's the amount of errors I'm having on 5.1 and compare that to 5.2. So any labels that you're using can help find the data, but also run different analysis on, right? So let's say in this case, I want to look at logs from my MongoDB pod. So I would simply just say pod equals Mongo, and then I would actually add some wildcards around the word Mongo, and then I would just press on this start, and then this again will return everything within the last 15 minutes, and then we can actually see right here what container as well as what pod those came from, right? And then from here, let's say, hey, I want to do some basic analytics on these logs. I want to see how many messages are coming from this MongoDB pod. So what I can actually do is I can actually parse on the fly. So that's really one nice thing about Sumo Logic is I don't have to pre-parse my data. I don't have to do any Glock filters before I see the data to make sure I'm getting value out of it, right? So right here, as you can see, this is kind of an unstructured format of log. It's basically saying, hey, I sent X amount of messages to Sumo successfully. So let's go ahead and just pull out this value, right? So to do that, I can just simply highlight sent 33 messages to Sumo successfully. And then I could right click on this, and then I could just press on this parse selected text. And now I have this prompt up here. I can say right here, this is the value that I want to pull out. And I just simply click to extract this value. And I can simply name this field messages, hit submit. And then we're just going to extract that value right here over here. And then once I hit start again, it just pulled out those messages right from those logs, as we can see, right? So simple as that, right? Just to get the logs in the Sumo, then just do point and click parsing, and then we're pulling out these fields from each of these messages. Now the next step here is to run some basic analytics on this, right? So let's say, for instance, let's average out the amount of messages that I've been getting. So I can simply just add a pipe right here, say average messages, and then I'll just run this again so I can see what the average amount of messages that this MongoDB pod is sending. And as we can see here, in this case, it's just to be about 28.02. But what might be more interesting to me is what does this look like over time, right? So to do that, I can time slice the data. So let's add another pipe. Let's time slice this over 1 minute buckets, and then let's average these messages out by time slice. And then let's go ahead and let's just see what the average amount of messages sent from that MongoDB pod is over time. And as you can see, this is the result. And then we can actually display this different ways, but I want to display this right here for my graph over time. And that's kind of like what it looks like. So now I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty excited about this cool graph that I just created. Carl just pinged me and said he wants me to share it with him. And so I know he's pretty excited what I just did too. Let's go ahead and let's just add this to a dashboard, right? So to do that, we can simply press the add to dashboard button. We can do a very simple panel title, something like Femi's exciting MongoDB dashboard. And then for dashboard name, obviously because this is Carl's favorite dashboard, we can just keep things real simple. Carl's favorite dashboard. Create a new dashboard. And then next thing I want to do, we want to create it as one of our new dashboard data frameworks. And then we'll just simply click on add right here. Then we can resize this as we deem fit. And then, you know, just that easily I have my own custom dashboard, which I can refer to later, right? So again, if I go back to the search, the flow here was simply, we just made the search, we did some point and click parsing, and we didn't have to do any pre-filtering, and we can still get the value out of these unstructured logs, right? And then I just simply added that to my dashboard and came back over here, right? As you can see in bold, Carl's favorite dashboard. So maybe, you know, before I show you some out-of-the-box dashboards, maybe instead of having out-of-the-box dashboards, I'd like to add this custom dashboards to that Explore view we had earlier. So it's very easy to do that as well too, right? So I just go ahead and click on these 3 dots right here. Some people call it a hamburger menu, I believe, but I just call it 3 dots. And then I just want to say create stack linking. And then from there, we'll just say that I want to see this dashboard at the cluster level. So we can simply put in key right there, cluster. And then we'll say anytime we're at the cluster level, show us this dashboard. So I'll just simply put in that wildcard feature. Right here, I'll press apply. And then we want to make sure that this is saved. So let me hit save, which is, I think it's saved automatically for me. Save as. All right. And then the next thing we'll do, let's open up a new Explore view. And then when I'm at this cluster level, I can just simply click and then find that dashboard. I guess I saved it twice. So right here, Carl's favorite dashboard, real simple, real easy to use. So now not only do I have those fantastic wealth of out-of-the-box content, but I can also create my own custom dashboards, which I can navigate through in my Explore tab, right? So I know I just covered a lot right there. I'm going to pause for another second. We got some asked questions in the Q&A box. All right, so moving forward, so a lot of what I've been showing was, you know, Kubernetes specific and kind of custom searching and dashboarding. We also have a wealth of pre-built content for your non-Kubernetes sources as well. So we do have something called an app catalog. So I'll just go over here, click on app catalog. App catalog is just a repository of pre-built searches and dashboards for a lot of your various different sources. So we have here applications, OSs, clouds and services, just so you can get instant insights into those different entities that you're using. So just simply just navigating through the app catalog right here. You can search for different apps, or you can narrow your search down by different categories too as well. Once you have the data ingested, you can just add whichever apps you want, which will give you those pre-built searches and dashboards. Obviously, we have a lot of pre-built stuff for Kubernetes as well. Different security products. We have different web servers here too as well. If I'm working on compliance and security, that's over here too as well. Just to give you an idea of what these look like, I did take some time to open up some AWS dashboards. So right here, this is a AWS Cloud Shell Overview dashboard. So this one's more security focused. Just kind of gives you an idea of any of the users in your AWS platform, some created resources, some deleted resources over time. And then this other dashboard right here, this specifically shows you console logins. All right, so And then one other cool thing about all of this is that these are all based off of queries. So let's say one of these is interesting to you, you can just open it up and turn it into a query, an alert. Turn the query into an alert. So let's say, for instance, I see these logins without multi-factor authentication. I could simply click on this show and search button and then create an alert out of this. So the way I would do that is I would click on save as, schedule the search. Then I can schedule this in different intervals. But for this, I'm just going to go ahead and press on real time. And then we have different alert types. Our default one is emails, but we have different webhooks. So as far as, Slack, it's right here. We have PagerDuty, OpsGenie, Jira, ServiceNow, just different ways to get alerts out of the box too as well. So the next thing I want to do, I just want to discuss how collection works. But before that, I just wanted to take another couple of seconds break just to give people time to ask any kind of questions.
I mean, there was a couple questions in the chat about the Carbon Black pod.
Okay.
I think DevReady asked if we're running more than one pod on the same node for log generation. So the Carbon Black pod is a part of a deployment. So if you go back to that Explore tab for me, Femi, you can see that it's part of a deployment there, right? Since we're in that deployment view on the left-hand side, right? So just expand it out. Yep, so there's the deployment. And if you just click on the deployment, yeah, you should see how many pods are expected within that deployment. So there's one pod failed. And there's supposed to be one replica. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks, Carl. All right. Great question, Dev. Ready? I'll give it another couple of seconds before I move on to collection. All right. So actually, before we go on to collection, the next thing we can actually do is we do have a good amount of learning resources just to help you get the most out of your the Sumo Logic platform. So if I click on this home tab right here, we do have a lot of quick start videos within here, little micro lessons about different keywords, metadata insertion, and data collection. And then these hands-on labs right here too as well that anyone can take. We also have some links to documentation. We have this cheat sheet right here too as well. Just kind of different as far as parsing, and then different operators too as well, right in the same context. And then another cool feature we have right here is this certification tab. So right now we currently have about 6 certifications. So anything from fundamentals to metrics mastery. I don't want to brag, but I've personally taken all 6 and passed them all. So let's see how well the rest of you guys can do. And obviously we have this that seems a little bit more relevant for this call. This is the advanced metric with Kubernetes. And these are all free for all our users, right? These are included within the product at no additional charges, right? So any user can go in here, log in, and then take these certifications just to get the most out of your Sumo Logic investment, right? So let's just move back onto collection. All right, so as I said, this is data collection from Sumo Logic. We collect logs, events, metrics, and security data via FluentBit, FluentD, Prometheus, and Falco. These are all open source data collectors maintained by the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Utilizing open source tools for collection and data enrichment is ideal, given that these collectors receive a lot of community support and typically have integrations for any type of data that you might want to collect. So right up top for log collection, we use a fluent bit dataset that runs on every node in the Kubernetes cluster. This will gather the logs and then ship them to Sumo Logic. For the events, we deployed a new Fluent D plugin that runs as a deployment. So all events go to the API server. So the plugin essentially watches on the API server, and as new events are detected, those are shipped over to Sumo. So for metrics, we're using Prometheus to collect those metrics. So these are like your CPU memory disk for the nodes and containers, as well as Kube state metrics API, right? So server matrix and server matrix like latency. All of those things are pulled with Prometheus, and we're essentially just using Prometheus as a collector. For us, it was a natural choice for collecting metrics because Prometheus does a really great job of auto discovery, as well as the fact that a lot of things within Kubernetes are already pre-instrumented with the Prometheus format. So a couple of things to also note. I know we know Prometheus doesn't do exceptionally well at scaling and then long-term retention of metrics. So for us, it was a good marriage of Prometheus for collection using Sumo Logic, right? Because being a multi-tenant cloud platform, we excel at scaling, and we can really send as much data as we need, and then also for long-term retention too as well. And then the last piece is just this security with Falco. Like with logging and metrics collection, there are a wealth of tools available to provide container-level Kubernetes security visibility. These tools can provide insights into behavior activity to detect anomalous activity and security events, compliance and audit events, and then our integration with Falco, which is another open source tool, detects anomalous activity and security events, right? So once deployed, Falco uses the kernel module, user space libraries, and Kubernetes audit events to watch for any security events matching one of the conditions defined in the Falco rule file. And then notifications are issued for matching events and collected with FluentD or FluentBit, just like logs and events. And then from there, we funnel everything through a centralized FluentD pipeline for metadata enrichment. So not only do we tag the container, pod, and node and cluster, we also identify the service and deployment for each entry. We know Kubernetes is rich with metadata, pods, labels, namespace, you name it. And these are all descriptors of these entities and how they relate to one another, right? But, by themselves, they don't expose everything on their own. And then the purpose of this enrichment pipeline is to ensure that for every log, metric, and event, that you know what container it's from, what pod the container is in, and then what pod labels, what node it's on, what namespace is running, and then what cluster it is running in. So, we like to say that with metrics serving as a smoke detector and logs enabling us to drill down to the root cause, unify this data source around a common metadata language enables us to easily correlate these signals and where we can pivot from the metrics data about a cluster to the events data about a cluster to the logs data about an application. And then the last piece is the Helm. So all this is set up using a single Helm chart command. As easy as Helm installs Sumo Logic. You give us an access key and an ID, and then we use to create the collector and sources. It configures FluentBit, FluentD, and Prometheus, and then deploys them, right? So that covers as far as collection from Sumo Logic. The last piece I just wanted to go over, just to fully cover what you can do with Sumo Logic, just from a Kubernetes standpoint, is not only navigate and collect information from your CI/CD pipeline, like your Circle GI, your Jenkins, your Harness down here, all these things you see here, but we can also, the actual Kubernetes platform and what it's running in it, right? So any of these different security sources, like our pre-built Falco integration, and then any other Kubernetes and container security partners that you may be using too as well. So that pretty much covers everything that we wanted to discuss. So it's time for any last questions you guys might have. So feel free to go ahead and just ask them in the chat, and Carl and I will try to respond to the best of our ability.
So we have a question here, what version of Kubernetes this is? I'm unsure what current cluster we have, but we can share you the chart and the versions in which we support today. which is located in our GitHub repository. We will share this in the chat here. See, there's another question. We're asking about the network type. It doesn't matter what network type you're using on Kubernetes, as we'll, like Femi showed you, we'll deploy on your cluster with our collection Helm chart, which will deploy FluentD, FluentBit, etc.
I see Jeff just asked the question. In the demo, is Sumo Logic connected to a cloud or traditional host running Kubernetes? Are you asking as far as the platform Sumo Logic, like where are we hosted? Oh, so that's not.
Pods are hosted in Amazon. So this cluster that you see here is an EKS cluster, I believe.
Great question so far.
So we have another one where it says, what security product works best with Sumo? Any of the security apps that Femi showed in, I think it was the previous, actually this slide here. Right? So you can see those different types of tools our customers as well as technology partners that Sumo Logic has here. So whether it's Falco with our default Helm chart, or you already have something like Twistlock or StackRox in play, we can integrate with most of the tools that customers are using to help secure their Kubernetes environment. And then we have another question, is FluentD in the Sumo Logic collector accessible for additional configuration, or is it private for lack of a better term? So you can customize our FluentD pipeline, or the FluentD pod. We try to expose as many of the different parameters or plugins to be able to utilize as well if you want to customize that FluentD pod there. To add in like additional configuration. So one example that we frequently see is, hey, I want to send my FluentD log or all my Kubernetes logs to Sumo Logic, but also have FluentD send those to an Amazon S3 bucket directly. So you can utilize something like the copy plugin in FluentD to be able to send to both destinations. So FluentD, we have another question here. FluentD is applying Sumo Logic platform with all the metadata that shows up in the graphs on the dashboards. That's correct. So if you go back, I think one slide here, Femi. Yep. So you can see here that enrichment FluentD pipeline that FluentBit, FluentD all send to does that data enrichment and forwards that on to Sumo. And another question here, can we split up logs with FluentD to send some to Sumo Logic and say another destination? Yeah, similar to the use case I suggested with using the copy plugin. You could also do similar types of filtering within FluentD to pick and choose which ones you actually want to send to Sumo Logic. But also you can send everything to Sumo Logic, and then we also have things like processing rules to exclude log messages that you may not want to send. Or FluentD plugin also has the ability to filter data being sent to Sumo based on metadata. So a particular namespace or pod that you may not want to send to Sumo, you can create some filters to exclude those. For SecOps, do you support sysdig? So sysdig hosts, or I guess Falco, right, is part of sysdig's community, or sysdig provide Falco, so we do support Falco there. But if you're using sysdig specifically, as long as they log their log messages to something like standard out or standard error, FluentD will pick those up automatically. And there's a question on the cost advantage of using Sumo Logic and Kubernetes combination in comparison to what? So what are you comparing the cost of Sumo Logic with Kubernetes to? All right, we'll table that question for now. And then I think the one more here, is there an expected lag time or time and lag in the logs reporting to Sumo once pushed from the collectors? For it to be indexed and go through our pipeline, you can expect to see log messages within our search UI within a minute or two there. Femi can also show you that we have like a live tail mechanism that you can essentially see your logs in live, similar to like a tail minus F if you're familiar with Linux systems. So good for real-time debugging of an issue.
All right. If there are no further questions, some things as far as next steps, you can, if you haven't done so already, sign up for a free 30-day trial, or you can join our public Slack channel. And then this is my email right here. So just very simple, femi@sumologic.com, or you can find me in our public Slack channel just at FEMI, just for any questions you guys might have. Thank you, guys. We do have a question here that says, will the video be shared? Yes, after the recording is uploaded, we will be sharing the recording with everyone that attended today. And thank you all for attending and participating with us.